Was your first year 2020? Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah.
Because it was
So that was wild because we were all fired up. Yep, we wanted to. We'd seen Hope Week before, and we were like, "Let's go!" And then it was like, "Find your own Hope Week. We can't do it together." So yeah.
But what is interesting about that is for the very first Hope Week that I got to work with you, I remember being like startled by the fact of how intensely you were into it, because you were one of the people who actually did. Like, I'm pretty sure that you guys did, you kind of wrangled the biggest Hope Week project that year with the situation we were rebuilding that person's house.
Right.
Which was really cool to me.
Right.
It was like my introduction to you and your willingness to go above and beyond what was, I don't know, easy or normal.
Sure. Well, and I think that blew me away right off the bat too, because you're like, I'm going to put in the call to a couple of guys, Christian, Jacob, Mike Davenport, guys just came. Ethan, just came and served, worked with me on my project, never met me before, had no idea who I was, what I was like, That just kind of set the tone for a lot of my relationships here,
That was super cool. Yeah, and also set the tone for then the fact that sure enough, now you being like a Hope Week director.
Yeah.
Which makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So I'm excited that we get to talk through some of the different pieces of this. Obviously, ask some questions that I asked on social media, just what people have had. We just finished Hope Week 2025, the biggest year we've ever had by far. I could share the numbers once again, obviously, for us. But mind-blowing, basically. To finish a week, 2025 was 4,558 hours of service and $40,872 dollars worth of projects, which is way bigger than anything I could have imagined when we first got started.
Yeah.
Like, it's so different, than where we did start.
Speaking of which,
what
was the first vision of Hope Week, and what was the very first project, if you can remember?
I actually can, because I was thinking about this. So when we were starting, all the way back when we were just a church plant, which there's still a whole lag between church plant and then Hope Week, because we launched the church in 2010, and we didn't do our first Hope Week project till 2015. Okay. So it wasn't like we had that planned out and ready to go. But when we were planting Acts Church, I specifically remember like us talking about different stuff, because obviously for us as a church, we always talk about how faith without action is dead, right? The whole concept that even in our name with Acts Church, right, that those trees that don't produce fruit we cut down. So it's like, man, what could we do in the community? And I think that's when we were pitching a bunch of different ideas that we had. Actually, the one that won out, like, I think we did it in 2014 or 2013, as far as like, as we started going and we really put a ton of effort into it, was the thing we called Movies on the Move. And what we did is we did movie nights, and we did five Friday nights in a row in the month of August. And we did one in LaSalle, Peru, Oglesby, Spring Valley, and Utica. And each of those Friday nights we'd come out, have like a big inflatable screen, do all that. Actually, we still have the inflatable screen, which I need to find like a usage for, because I was like, we'll redo that. We'll do that event sometime again in the future. But it's always like Hope Week is our thing now for summer. But no, when we were doing that and we were like trying to think about like different ideas, that was already the first idea of like Hope Week did show up, because we just said like, if we could get tons and tons of people from the church, just go out and go and fix them a park or something like that. Just go take care of something, and not make it like an event that you invite the community to, because very often that's what we always do, right? Is we do like an event that we invite people to. But like, what would people think if the church just showed up somewhere and just like, we just came to fix stuff, just to make stuff better, take care of something, right? And all the way back then, I was like, we should get some like bright blue shirts. So everyone could have the blue shirts. And when you went to do it, people couldn't ignore it, because they'd be like, what are all those people dressed in the same shirt doing this project? So that was all the way back like in 2010 when we were planning our church. The first idea of it came about, but we never like did something with it specifically. It turned into this idea that I had, which initially was the idea called Hope LP. And my idea for Hope LP was specifically as a task to unify churches. So when we planted our church again, I was like, I just want our church to be about God's kingdom, not just about our church, still our core value, right? The church before Acts Church, right? And when we were doing all that, I was like, well, what would happen if we could get the churches together on something? And my initial idea was, it was actually three pieces. It was that we would do a combined service together. We do like a big giant like combined church service. In the summertime, we would do a big community service project where we go out in the community and we'd do something. And that was the idea of like Hope Week. And then at Christmas time, we would do a big just generosity push. And we would just like give away tons of stuff to families, to people in need and like that. And my idea was if we could do those three things. And then when we started like talking about it and stuff like that, I quickly realized, I was like, you know what's really, really hard is to get churches to share services and to share money. That's really difficult.
Sure.
But I was like, you know what's really easy is to agree on the fact that everyone out there needs Jesus and we could go and we could lend a helping hand. So I just kind of like, I cut away those other two things and realized that it was like almost too big of an ask. And just said like, what if we just showed up together for 1 week and we just went out and did that? And that's where like the initial idea came into, is me just pitching it to a couple of pastor friends in LaSalle in Peru. Because that's when we started. The first year, I still have the numbers here because I did keep track of them. Yeah, we did 926 hours and we had $5,000 budget is what we did for it. But the first project like that I spotted and that we got to do, we redid this year, which was that Mary Hegler Karras Park.
Yep.
I traveled around to all the different parks. And at the time, I went and found this. I bet you I can find the picture and I could throw it as an overlay, because I found this park it is kind of tucked away. Like it's yep. almost forgotten about. But there were no swings on the swing set. The area underneath of it had like just some busted up concrete in one area, and it was just like overgrown with weeds. And I remember saying like, oh, someone literally, like they forgot that this park exists. Like people aren't taking care of this park. So we went out, and the reason why it stood out to me so much that year in 2015. So we went out, we dug out the whole bottom of this, we put down new like mulch, we hung new swings that we had bought, and we repainted it. And we put up caution tape around it. We ended up leaving. And then later that afternoon, I said, someone needs to go back and pull down the caution tape. And I forget, it might have been Jeff Hill, honestly. And when they went to pull the caution tape, there were two kids already swinging on the swings. They went underneath the caution tape, and they were already swinging.
Very cool.
And I remember when they sent me the picture of like the kids, like honestly almost feeling like choked up, because you're like, yeah. Like there are kids who they live in that area.
Sure. And
as soon as they saw a swing set up, they were like, let's go swing. And I remember it just completely like confirming to me, like, dude, this is what this is like all about. Like just that one first project of like, let's clean up this swing set. And there's kids who are already there experiencing it, where you're like, yeah, this is worth everything.
Yeah. So one thing I thought was neat, especially since I hadn't been here for the full 10 years, was that we've had Hope Week colors.
Yes.
Of different time periods and stuff and everything. So to redo that park in the new colors and doing some other parks in new colors, the feedback that I heard from other people, from leaders, and everything, this year's colors just popped. So kudos for the choices on that.
That's Shelby.
It is exciting.
The creative director. My sister.
Good work,
She's
Shelby.
amazing,
That was awesome. Yeah, because it just brightened it up, gives it new life and new hope.
Yes,
if you will. So that's awesome. So.
Well, coat of paint makes a big difference for kids going by, as far as like seeing a park and be like, we should go play there for sure. It's like what engages it. But isn't that crazy? Like I remember that project, and it was so cool 10 years later to go back and redo that park.
Yeah.
It's like a neat circle.
And as we're looking at projects, we can kind of, when we turn the pictures into you and we discuss them, you can kind of look at some of the parks and say, okay, those colors, that was back in this year, you know, which is kind of unique. Totally. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, 10 years. Right. I don't know. Crazy.
Yeah.
10 years.
So I think a lot of people, and they phrased it different ways and stuff and everything, but a lot of people I think were wondering, like, what are the processes behind the planning like? Because there's so much that goes into it. I know we've already done a couple of recap meetings, talked about next year, talked about potentially even having more meetings, which seems crazy because we do have a ton of meetings, but talk a little bit about the early process, maybe some of the behind the scenes stuff that people would know about.
Yeah, I think the big thing with that is most people probably still couldn't guess how much it takes to get to a Hope Week project, right? Because the Hope Week projects are really, really big. When you're there, it feels like this is crazy to get this much done in this much time. But really the reason why that's even possible is just because there's so many hours leading up to a project. You know, like we get a ton of man hours on a project, say like an evening project where we work for 3 hours. And because we get 50 people there, you know, it's like, man, you crank out like 150 hours in one time. But for like that 3 hour project, you know, I bet you there's probably 12 to 15 hours of planning for each one of those, right? Because, yeah, all of it goes back to, I might be jumping between, you know, different questions that people had here, but like when we get started, we start all the way back. This next year, we're talking about having a meeting in February. Because like this year, we started at the beginning of March. And it takes that time because when we get going in the beginning of March, we're communicating with these different organizations, these nonprofits, or with these communities. You did a ton of it this year, obviously stepping in as a director. You and Ann both took a whole a step into that, and you can attest, right? Like you have to make a lot of phone calls, and you have to follow up a bunch to be able to get people to kind of start setting these plans because.
Yeah, we're talking June, and we're asking in March.
Right.
They're not there yet.
Yes.
You know, so.
Yeah, for sure. But that's the part, because to work our way back, right, it's usually the first full week in June. So that means all the projects need to really be done by the middle of May. And then sometimes with community organizations, that might take a whole month for them to make a decision where they have to bring it to the council meeting or something like that, or talk to the right people. So that pushes you back to like the middle of April.
Right.
And that's the issue why we start those conversations in March, because you're like, by the time it, you know, otherwise you just run into this insane time crunch. And the hard part is, I'm sure you can attest, like it's actually hard to give away Hope Week projects.
Yeah.
Like it's not easy because I think twofold. I think one, just like you're asking people to think outside of the box of what they normally do. Because most communities, they're not asking themselves regularly the question, what would I do if I had 150 volunteers and $5,000 extra? Like that's not usually a conversation you have. So you're making them think of something different they haven't thought of. And then the second part of it too is I think Hope Week is different in the fact that most of the time when you have volunteer organizations, they want to do part of something and they need a bunch of hand holding and all this. So it does feel so different where I think sometimes people are like, I don't have time to manage all these people or all this.
Sure.
The good part is as we built relationships, we've got to the place where people really trust us, where we say like, oh no, like we'll make the plan, we'll get the supplies, we'll do the work, we'll do the cleanup. Like you literally just have to tell us thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
So we don't get, you know, in trouble for like, why are you guys in a park picking tables,
right?
But I think because of that, you know, it's like there's a little bit of like you have to work through, like almost coach people through these different pieces. I mean, I'm guessing there are probably people who you dealt with in communities that you probably had 5, 6, 7 phone calls to get projects set, right?
Yeah.
Between initial ideas, hey, here's some ideas that we have, which we do a lot of. We did all that this year. We literally go and just scout communities. We look for things that are broken, things that aren't taken care of, and then give those back to parks directors, mayors, and those that say, we think we could make this better, which has been really critical because a lot of times people don't see what they don't see. I mean, honestly, that park that was in LaSalle, the parks director at the time kind of got in trouble over that. Like, the mayor was even like, why was this park in this shape?
Yeah.
But it's like sometimes you kind of just don't see what you don't see. Like, oh, I don't know. Like, I guess I haven't really worked on that park much lately.
And other than the people that live right around there, most of LaSalle probably doesn't even know it exists.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah. So that's where we start all the way back at like March, and we get projects started. That's when we have our first meetings that we start talking about what we think we can actually do. We use our previous numbers to try to set out how many projects we think we can do. When we very first started, it was just one project in the morning and one project in the evening. That's all we had. And you might have 20 or 30 people at each one, and we'd do a park together in the evening. We might have an organization that we worked with during the day. Now you're talking about multiple projects each night. I was thinking on Sunday, Wasn't it that we had 7 projects happening simultaneously, I think at noon, and then we ended up having 3 more projects follow up that night, where I think we had like 10 different projects that were scheduled in one day.
I had several project leaders tease me because I was trying to run between
Yeah.
the different projects I scouted, and they said, "I really think this is just a strategy to avoid doing any actual work." And I said, "No,
That's me with
I'm trying to be everywhere that I help scout it, in case questions come up, in case whatever." But yeah, it was kind of funny because that was the what was tossed out. Yeah, I think you're trying to avoid work. You're just running around, but
Right. No, that's me when I film all the time. I feel bad because I show up, film for a second. I'm like, cool, see you guys. And I have to get in the truck. But no, like, and that's the other part, I guess. Once we get the projects, right? Because even after we finally solidified, we're going to do these projects, we think we can do them, right? Then there's the whole process of when can we schedule these projects? Tons of these projects are in communities or in parks where, so in an organization, it can only be day XYZ.
Yes.
Or then in community parks, it's like we have games on Tuesday and Thursday. It can't be then. So then you're taking these pieces and you're trying to arrange them. Literally, we just hang giant whiteboards. That's like our solution, right? Like try to get as much visually out there as possible because like it's so hard to just like look at a list. So it's like try to spread them out as much as you can and where can we put these? Then once we get those dates where we think we can balance not only with the schedule, then we have to consider what are the size of the projects and how many people are needed at each. Because if a project is really big, it needs to be paired with maybe a small project in an evening because we know we only have, say, an average of 100 to 150 people who might come in an evening. And then not only that, but on top of that, we have to balance when are projects needing certain tools. Because you can't put certain projects at the same time because they need specialized tools. So we have to even like balance out those. Like usually every year there's pinch points. This year one of them was wheelbarrows, one of them was extension ladders. And then we have to do the math between them and make sure we have enough, or we have to go buy more to fill in because we know, oh man, we thought we had, I mean, literally, we own like how many, 20 some extension ladders?
Yeah.
And then we do the math and we're like, now we need 25 at least 3 different projects or 4 different projects.
I think that's a piece that people wouldn't think of if they've never seen behind the scenes, is how much equipment and stuff that actually goes into all this planning. And like you said, then making sure that you have projects that aren't conflicting, that both need the same things, that the trailers can be where they need to be on time. That was a whole the behind the scenes for all that stuff is its own animal, I feel like, you know. I think if you had a picture of the whiteboard to overlay, like you said, with the first Hope Week picture of the park, that'd be fun, because I think that it always blows me away the first time that I come in and all the whiteboards up or the sticky notes and Post-its, you know, of, okay, this is where these leaders need to be, and this trailer has to be moved over to this town, this one has to be brought back, reloaded, unloaded, you know. The timing of everything just is so intricate.
The components part of like not just the people, because obviously we do the whole people process, right? And then you actually handled the leader process, right? Of like, what leaders are we going to put in? Which every year we're always building new leaders because we're trying to have multiple leaders at a project. When you have a project, Oglesby was a good example this year, where Oglesby really, if it wasn't for the fact of us attacking these giant projects, Oglesby would easily be like 3 or 4 separate projects. But we want to do them all at one time. So it's like, well, we need 3 or 4 different groups of leaders that can tackle these. Finding the right leaders in the schedule and trying to schedule them, which I'm sure was like, you know, trying to put the right people in the right places for you, right?
And that's the other part too. Like we try to ask early enough, hey, what's your week look like? Are you able to take time off work? Is that your plan? What's your availability? Only nights? Okay, we can work with that, whatever it is. And then try to, you know, again, fit the pieces to the puzzles. So.
Yes. And then the next piece beyond that, I think, is the materials, where then it's either purchasing and getting materials, which we buy, you know, I mean, like 50, 60, 70 gallons of paint a year, depending on what we're doing with these projects. It's crazy. We literally have a commercial paint account with Home Depot. How many churches have a commercial paint account? We literally do, because we buy as much as a commercial painting company. In 1 week, we buy what most guys are buying over, you know, 4 or 5 months as like a commercial painter, which is so crazy. But getting all that stuff in regards to the supplies, balancing out the cost of these projects, right? And then figuring out, like you said, how do we transport all these different products, getting them loaded, getting people to pull trailers to projects. And then when it comes to the idea of then tons of these projects that we're doing that are landscaping related or something like that, where we're talking about not just enclosed trailers to pull equipment, but then we're talking about dump trailers. We rent and then we borrow dump trailers to be able to run, or then flatbed trailers that are moving equipment, because as we've kind of expanded, I guess, what we're doing, we're super blessed to have people who are really talented and have equipment where it's like we're hauling skid steers or tractors or, man lifts to locations to be able to do as well too. So if I remember right, this year we managed 5 enclosed trailers, 2 dump trailers, 2 flatbed trailers, and a pull behind man lift. So we had to manage like 10 different trailers that had to be moved between projects, aside from just like the materials. So it's like that, even that, like moving these pieces between, because they're one after another, like it has to leave this project and come back, and then that has to go from this to this project the next day. Like that's where, again, the whole 12, 15 hours for a 3-hour project probably is maybe still actually under counting how much time it just takes to get all those logistics worked out. But that's also part of the reason why like Hope Week almost feels so magical when you're part of it, because when you participate in Hope Week and you just show up and you go to projects, you just show up and you get to have an awesome time. It's like great. Like I get to paint a picnic table today. I get to help install landscaping timbers around something. And what's neat about that is like that's actually where I think like that's part of like what leadership is, right? Is leadership is like carrying all the stuff to get it ready so that like the soldiers can like do the actual work, right? But it's like that's the part of like what leadership really is it's just a different form of servanthood. And obviously Jesus is like the best example of that ever. That's literally what he says, right? Is that like if you want to be the greatest, like become the one who serves the most people. And that's actually what I think like our leaders really are, especially with Hope Week. It's such a good example because it's not like it's like, well, I'm a leader, like, people puff out their chest. It's like a leader is like, man, like you're just going to do a whole bunch of service to get other people ready so that they can have that awesome win, right? Like you don't have to think about this because I spent hours figuring this out, or even the leaders when we talk about it, going and trying to understand the projects and find the pitfalls and solve them before people show up, because you don't want to have a project stall out because you didn't think of the right material or the right tool, right? But I just love that so much. No, and we literally transform our space. Again, I think I have pictures I could maybe even throw over, but like transforming our entire auditorium to just being a massive, like, it's like a project fulfillment center, right? Of like packing like totes of different stuff and sending them in trailers and like figuring all that out. Shout out to Jeff Hill, because he really oversees that and tries to get like all those details filled so that each of these trailers show up with what they need at the right time. But yeah, we, like as a church, we own like 4 different enclosed trailers that we utilize for that. And then, we have, I would guess, a few thousand square foot of storage that we have to have for the materials all the rest of the year too, because there's so many.
So if I could just speak to the camera for one moment. I know we're not looking at the camera, but one part of Hope Week that is not magical is pulling staples out of picnic tables.
No.
So if you're one of the community leaders,
stop putting staples in picnic tables, for the love of God.
If you love Hope Week and want to show us appreciation, the next time you have a picnic at one of the shelters, use the clips or something. Do not use staples. We'll love you. Thank you.
I love that. That's like a PSA for Hope Week. Like, we love your communities. We love this. Just one thing. Please, for the love of God, stop using staples on picnic tables. That is like the bane of our existence.
It is literally hours and that right there can make people not want to participate. I think if their heart wasn't in the right place, if they weren't doing it in the right spirit of things, and yet they do it joyfully. And sometimes we'll have some music playing in the background. People are visiting, getting to know each other, and they just take it on gleefully like every other thing we do.
It was so cool in Oglesby this year when we redid all those picnic tables, because Oglesby is the worst. If you're from Oglesby, I'm sorry, you're the worst at Staples. At Staples, it's so bad. But like that project where each like a group of people would get together, 2 or 3 people to work on a picnic table, right? And it was interesting because most people finished 1 picnic table in the night. Some people maybe did 2, depending on what their situation was. But I remember walking through and I told a couple of people, what's amazing is that if they sent a couple of parks workers out here to do this, we just in one night did an entire week's worth of work. This would have been a whole week.
Oh, absolutely.
You think about if 2 guys got sent out there from the city, they'd spend a whole week. You'd spend days, literally days, just working, doing.
And that's if they didn't quit.
Well, totally. Yeah, I'm out. I'm not doing this. Very true. Very true. Not interested in this. I didn't sign up for this. Not my job. Yeah. Where I feel like our people are so excited to get to do it. And also, I think that's that is one of the other really fun parts, because I've had people over the years say but why do it all at once? Why not spread it out? But that's the other part that is really, really exciting, is because it all happens all at once.
Yes.
And that's part of the part that makes it so magical, right? It's in 7 days, the amount that we accomplished, 4,000 hours and $40,000.
Yeah.
It's what makes it, as I always say, unignorable to our community.
And I think we do have often somebody say, well, can we go back and do this? Or can we start early for this? And we really don't for the most part. And all of the planning that goes into it is not part of those service hours that we count. So all those hours are just not even in those numbers.
Yep.
So the reality is a lot bigger. But I agree. It makes it more magical and special that it's all compacted into 1 week. And then we rest up and get ready for the next year.
Yes, exactly. Recover for 12 months.
So speaking of projects, Cam, somebody had asked in the questions, they said 3 most radical rewarding outcomes, but I'll say, what are some of your favorite either transformations, projects, things that you've done over the 10 years? Which ones kind of stand out a little bit in your mind?
Yeah. So the first one I just told you about, obviously, that one's always been in my mind because it was year 1 and it was super special, right? I'd say another one that was really exciting is the year that we were off for, 2020, where we just did the My Hope Week projects. We ended up just putting aside $10,000 towards the next Hope Week project the year after. And then that was cool because we were able to purchase and install an entirely new playground set of equipment at LaSalle's Rotary Park.
Yeah.
And that was neat because it basically was an area where there was no park, and then in 7 days there was a park. The guys who were helping on that, I said that when we launched the Hope Week on the Sunday, and I was in 7 days there's going to be a park right here. And my father and Jeff Rothrocker, one of them, they're we really hope that's true. Because it was excavating and underlayment and post holes and concrete and assembling it. And they got it done. It was 7 days. We got it done. But that was so cool too, because it literally was, again, 7 days, and here's a new playground that's in a park in a community, which is just amazing, right? And then I guess there's multiple ones of these, but I really, really love the projects we do in small towns.
Yes.
So I love LaSalle, Peru, Oglesby, Spring Valley, Utica, and we've done so many different projects in those that have been incredibly rewarding. But there's something really, really cool. This year, definitely the standout for me was Cedar Point being out there. It's really, really cool when you come to a community that's a 300-person community, a Troy Grove, a Hollowayville, a Cedar Point, and that we can come in and do something that is beyond their budget, beyond their the scope of what they could do, because very often they have one person who helps mow, you know what I mean, in their community. And I think that's been super rewarding. Cedar Point this year is a really good example where when we were standing out there and you have the mayor and you have people who are associated with the town, board coming out, and they're just astounded, where it's I can't believe you guys just come and do all this stuff, right? And that's happened in multiple communities. I'd say Cedar Point was just a good example this year of that, where it's so neat to get to see a mayor actually just surprised by the church's generosity, which is what all this is about anyway, right? That we have this opportunity for people to be able to see just the hope that we have, where I think it is surprising to them, because in all these organizations and in all these communities, how many times have we heard that they're you can't find volunteers anymore? That's just a a ubiquitous conversation amongst organizations and non-for-profits. You can't find volunteers anymore. And it's so cool that it's like, we're growing every year.
Yeah.
Like there's more people who are going to be here this year. There's more people who are out here and they're serving radically. They're not showing up one stop. These people are like, you're talking about people who, we have people who probably serve 80 plus hours in the week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean, like serve just nonstop throughout it. And it's so cool to get to like, for people to see that the church is so different, where it's like, why are you guys not facing this shortage?
Yeah, right.
And be like, well, there's a reason. Like we have a layer of hope that, yeah, a lot of people don't have, right? Like that selfishness that I think has crept into our culture. And of course, our faith motivates us to be so different than that, where it's like, we can't be those people. Like that's not our heart. We've already been so radically served by Jesus, right? That it's just like, I think we've even said this before when we get to Hope Week projects, you're like, this isn't too much. Yeah. Like this isn't too much for Jesus. Yeah. Like think what he did for you. And you're like, yeah, you're right. Like, man, like this is compared to what Jesus has done for me. Yeah. Like, man, I'm so glad to get to serve this way, you know?
Right.
But those have all been super impactful. Like I said, that first one with just those kids, and then the new project, and then even just Cedar Point this year was a really special one for me.
Good.
Too good.
How about one of the questions they asked was, what is the hardest project you've ever done? And when I think of the hard projects, my mind tends to go right away to our special forces team.
Sure.
And so maybe the project, and maybe I'll just touch a little bit with that, because when you mention somebody like your dad, John Graper, some of these people are just so amazing. They literally just say, send me where you need me, tell me what you need from me. You know, most of us get the opportunity to sign up for projects, and some of these volunteers just say, Cameron, Ethan, you guys tell me what you need me to do, and I'll do it. I'll serve.
Yeah, exactly. So. No, we've had a bunch of those that really are like, most recently would definitely be this year in regards to Utica, where we poured a half-court basketball court. A job like that where it literally took the entirety of the week. We started that project on the Saturday before we started to get the excavation done, I believe. Or we're doing some like of the shooting as far as like the level on that, and then day after day trying to do something like that where that's one of those ones where, you know, even like not to pat ourselves on the back, but when we talk about like even like the $40,000, the real craziness about that isn't like the $40,000. It's the amount of money that doesn't get spent, because it's like that project. Like I'm not picking on any commercial company. Like they should, it's a business, they should make money.
Yeah.
But you know, if you hire somebody to come in and do that and be like, can I hire somebody where the city doesn't have to do it, to come in and excavate and install a concrete basketball court, you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars, right? I mean, like any company would be like, I'm sure 15, 20 grand to be like, we're gonna bring in all this equipment, we're gonna excavate this. So projects like that are just huge, and all of these different people, be it, you know, people like Christian, people like Jeff, where they donate not only their skills and wisdom, but then like Christian, I mean, he spent almost the entire week donating not only his time, but his equipment that he has for his business, where we get to do projects with, you know, like commercial grade excavators and all this, and it's just all given for free. That one was a huge one this year for sure, where it took the entirety of the week to be able to pour that and get that basketball court installed. I would say aside from that, we've also just had projects that the amount of like complexity that's in them is substantial. Organizations that we've done work for, like Putnam County Community Center or Under His Wings Women's Shelter, where we'll go in and it'll be like, Under His Wings is a good example. We've gone in and we've had people who are savvy and who are union electricians donate their time to completely rewire sections and fix problems where like lights aren't wired correctly and they're dangerous, and they fixed them all for them and donated their time. I think it was 2 years ago, we come in and completely redid their bathrooms at Under His Wings, and we had guys come in and install all new hardwood floors and showers and all this stuff for like, you know, like the things, stuff like that, where the people who run the organizations are just like, we have literally nobody who can do this. We have no clue how you do this. Like they'll just, Under His Wings is a good example where they're like, we'd love the bathrooms to be better. And we're just like, what does better mean? And like talking through it.
Sure.
And then they're just like, but we have nobody who can do this work. And then us just being able to run the ball with it and say like, what if we put in new showers? What if we put in new laminate floors? Would you be cool with that? What if we, yeah, absolutely. And then just come in and get those projects hammered out over the course of a week.
Yeah.
Which is just amazing. But those are definitely, I think you're right, probably the hardest ones are usually special forces ones, because it's not just even like getting enough people to show up. It's, we have to find the right people who actually know how to do this work and then get them there.
Right. Yeah, we're not saying, Mark Schneider, can you come in and do some plumbing? That's not a good match.
Can you rewire this electrical panel? Or
not a good match.
I'm not interested.
So we say, Mark Schneider, you like to talk. So how about if you meet with some community leaders and some, you know.
But everyone has their skill set to offer. Yes, but those are definitely probably like the hardest ones for sure, where you're like, man, like getting this done is going to be a huge challenge to be able to accomplish by the end of, of a week, right? Those are big ones, yeah.
Awesome. What has the experience of the 10 Years of Hope Week brought into your life unexpectedly? And one of the questions that I had also separately that kind of ties in that same thought process is there a personal relationship that has grown or even started with Hope Week that stands out in your mind? You know, what are the 10 years meant for you personally?
Yeah, that's cool. I'd say there's a number of things. So one is that I never thought I would have such an intimate knowledge of how to do some of these projects and how to fix these.
Right.
Or like do these tasks, right? Like understanding of estimating paint and all these different other things, right, that I've learned over the course of those years, which has been really cool. Or I jokingly said, like the one time, I'm like, if somebody like talked to me, they'd think I'm like some sort of like Rain Man, because I can tell you like what equipment is in every park in every community, where it'd be like, what's in that park? And I can like tell you it because I've spent 10 years doing it, where you're like, oh, that park, like that's got a swing set, it's got a and you're like some random park in like Spring Valley
even after we've scouted the project and you're like, well, wait a second, isn't there also this back in the corner?
It's so true. Yes, but just like over the years of doing all those and seeing all of them and trying to like think, because so to run back real quick to the beginning, year one, it's just me. We had a couple of different leaders who helped like run projects, but year one, it was just, I just drove around and looked at all the different communities and called everyone myself and just tried to sort some projects in LaSalle, try to sort some projects in Peru, right, and get some of those set up. So yeah, the amount of knowledge of those is hilarious, or the amount of knowledge of equipment. This year, Matt Cresto, he was looking at something that we were going to fix, and he's like, I don't know who makes this. It just says GT. I'm like, it's Game Time Solutions. I'm like, they're pretty common. He's like, how do you know that? And I was like, I can just tell you because I worked on all these different pieces of equipment. But so that's interesting. As far as like relationships, the coolest part is that in all these different communities, it's just given me such an opportunity to get to actually know the people who run these different towns.
Sure.
It's so cool, the opportunities I've had to talk to mayors, to talk to community leaders, right? To talk to organizational leaders where they know of me or they know of our church because of that, where there's those conversations back and forth, or, like it's not like a brag at all, but like it is funny that like I'll joke around and I'll say like, well, I can just like give the mayor of most of these communities like a call because they just realize like it's just easier for me to just give you my cell phone number, and not as like a brag, but just like because normally when I call you, I'm offering you so much value that it's like you don't mind me having your personal cell phone number, because I'm not calling you asking for stuff. I'm calling you saying, hey, can we come do a free project? And that's been really cool. Like even just this year, I had all of a sudden, I just got this phone call, and it's from one of the guys. He used to be a parks director in Oglesby, and now he's part of the parks department in Peru.
Sure.
And he's like, hey, I just saw your guys out at like, this certain thing. He's like, I'll get this and this figured out. But I thought it was interesting because like he not only like we just have each other's number because we've had this relationship of working together. But like he even sees the blue shirts and he's just like, I know you hope we guys are out there right now, like working on something. So that part, as far as like just the friendship with the community in general, like people who lead the community, has been so cool to get to grow. And then like probably like the most like touching part for me, we didn't get to do it this year. My hope is we get to do it next year. But that climbing wall that I was telling you about that Matt Cresto was working on, that came from the fact of one day where I took my kids out. My wife was getting her hair done in Spring Valley. I took my kids out and we just went to a couple parks and we're hanging out. And my oldest son Silas went to climb on this climbing wall, and a bunch of the handholds were broken. And he's like, man, a bunch of these things are broken. And I was like, yeah. And he looked at me and he's like, we should fix this for Hope Week. And that was like a really touching moment for me, because it was cool to get to see the fact that like him participating in it now, probably consciously for 3-ish years, 4-ish years, where like he's old enough to get it, that he gets like the vision behind it, right? Yeah. That it's like something's broken. We should just come and we should fix this. Like not like, because not to pick on people, but most people are like, someone ought to fix this. It's always someone oughta, right? And it was so cool to get to see him, like, hopefully that's my prayer, is that like across the board, everyone who participates, but then like, even if it was just my kids, that they have such a different view that he's like, we should come and we should fix this next year for Hope Week. Because that's what the church is about. And I was like, that was a cool dad moment where you're like, thankful. Right. Like that's what I want my kids to have, that mindset instead of the opposite. So that's kind of like a byproduct. Like that wasn't something necessarily I set out to do, but it's cool to get to see that being downloaded into my kids. For sure.
And so speaking of proud dad moments, I guess maybe we'll talk, not a question per se, but you give up a lot of your time, obviously that week, you're gone day and night. Amy's holding down the fort. Mom's helping out. Things going on, but but then Amy brings the kids out to the projects. She doesn't just say, "Okay, I'm gonna take the week and I'll take care of the kids. You go do your thing." She's active participant. So are the kids. Always so fun to see them out there and stuff. And then, like we talked about this year, a little more personal side is that Willow is your cuddle buddy at night. And she's used to you having you there to tuck her in at night. And so we kind of joked afterwards that once Hope Week's over, it's kind of air comes out of the bubble. Like you almost feel a little bit let down because it's so exciting, so good. But then you get to go back to some other good things as well, with family and stuff. So
no, totally. And that is like that week. It feels like almost being like where you have a job where you have to travel for work, because even though I'm right here, very often it's like I'm up and I'm gone before they're awake, and then I'm coming home. Well, because the situation is interesting with mine. It maybe shouldn't be the case, but right now, as far as we built our teams, one of the areas that we still have to grow in bench depth is the video side of it. Yeah. So very often I'm here till midnight, 1 o'clock at night, finishing up stuff that has to do with our promotion and our video stuff, so we can get that out. So then it's like, I get to sleep way after the kids are asleep there. But no, Amy, I even made a post about this here. Amy is the reason why I can do what I can do at that, just because we have that same vision for our life. Like we think of our lives as servants, and it's such a great opportunity to serve. And now she's out doing that. The crazy part is she did that through 4 kids having babies, like babies, and still, it would be Willow would be the tightest turnaround, where it would be a 2-month-old, while still having 3 other kids older than that, and me being gone for an entire week, basically to do this. If it wasn't for having a good wife who does, I would have had to drop out years ago.
Thankful. That's cool. Very cool. So what have you seen as far as the church and the people here, whether it's growth, whether it's radical serving, donation financially? What is, you feel like, some of the greatest changes you've seen over that 10-year period in the church here itself and the members?
Yeah, I think that it's been so good, and it's hard to know what it would be like without it, right? Because it's kind of like now 10 years in, you're like, what's the difference? And it's hard because this has just been like our culture now. But I think if you go back and say we don't start Hope Week 10 years ago and like where are we at? I'm sure we still have a great church, but I feel like Hope Week is such a tangible way that like communicates like we're meant to do something with our faith. And it's such an easy on ramp, like even easier than signing up for a team, even easier than those steps that we tell our church, like, hey, you should try this out. So I feel like it's just been such an amazing conduit for growing, like all the way from literally little kids, my kids' age, all the way through people who maybe even are older and grew up with a different type of faith, of just like, oh yeah, like I'm supposed to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And I think that it's built that over the years. The other cool part that we've seen, just even in the last couple of years with you helping Mark, is we've had the opportunity to also grow leaders that way, where we're identifying and we're giving opportunity to be able to serve. And then that's great because it's like a microcosm of a week, and we get to say like, are these people really like, do they have that gifting where they want to serve and they want to lead? And then you see those people like, you know, like rise or fall inside of it, which has just been a huge blessing for us as a church of continuing to identify leaders, right? That then can continue to serve aside from just Hope Week. I would say generosity too. I was really blown away this year that when we did like our special offering for that, aside from the budget that we had set aside, which another whole portion of the behind the scenes, like we said, is us as a church always budgeting a whole portion of our budget every single year, just so that we're always ready for Hope Week. What we do is basically 10% of our budget every single year just gets lopped off into what we call kindness, and then Hope Week takes up the broad majority of that kindness. There's some other money that's specific for like our external events we do in the fall and stuff like that. But then even beyond that, because we then make that ask basically like, here's what the church budget just as a whole can support for us to do a Hope Week project. Do you guys want to do more is basically the ask, right? Like, do you guys want to fund more? And I thought it was awesome this year to get to see it was like literally another, initially it was $19,000 and then $2,000 more dollars came in. So it was basically $21,000 came in aside from normal giving just to support going and serving, which, you know, like money isn't everything, but I think like money is a really great tangible vote of like confidence in something, right? So to me, our church supporting it that way is such a good example of like, wow, our church really cares about this. Like they have this heart, because it's easy to say you want to do something. It's another thing to be like, I'm going to write a $500 check and make sure that we can do these projects, right? And when I see so many people giving generously, and this year especially, we had so many people who just gave cash, or you can tell it was people who are just like, I want to give $50, I want to give whatever. It seems like such a vote of confidence of like our church really having this vision of like, we want to keep being these people in our community.
And I think it's completely consistent with your messaging throughout the year, not just Hope Week, but you know, you put your time and your finances into things that you care about, things that are important to you. So if Hope Week is something that you're pleased with, we always say we're not taking pride, we're not bragging, we're not whatever, but something that you feel you're well pleased about. You want to support that financially and in the time that you serve. So sometimes you may not have the finances, so maybe you serve a little extra. Sometimes it's the other way around. You don't have the time, but you have the finances. But yeah, I think it was a completely different level.
That's my story. Literally at the beginning when we started, when we were a young couple without kids, I was able to give more finances. Then you go 1, 2, 3, 4 kids, and you're like, well, money, not really. But exactly, pour in and do that part. That's my life story for the last 8 years. But.
And I do think that when you put your faith and your relationship with Christ behind all of that, it just takes to a different level. You know, I've always been somebody before I was part of Acts Church who felt like I wanted to leave the world a better place when my time was done. I like to try to leave people better than I found them. But then when you put the love of Christ behind that, it just takes it to a different place, you know. So
because it's even more so than just like, I think this is the right way to do it, or I think this is better. The reason why I think is what we talked about, where when you realize how radically God has already served you, right? And how generous he already was with you. It's almost like you don't have to motivate yourself. It's like you already have experienced that joy of like, man, like God's already done so much great for me. Like, why would I not be generous with my time? Or why would I not, you know, the idea of thinking about somebody who's in our community considering the local church as like a place to go to when they're in a hard spot or when they're in a tough situation. That hope being there, right, is like, that would be worth everything. You know, we say that all the time at Acts Church. Years ago, Amy and I had like this experience where it was like a tough year, like, and I remember at the end of the year, there was a girl who was at our church who had given her life to Jesus. And I just told Amy, I was like, well, like, what if 2019 was just for her?
Yeah.
Like, what if the reality is, like, it was just because it was, like, her year to get connected? And it was a good reframe for us because, like, both of us, like, basically, like, honestly, like, looked at each other and said, like, well, then it was worth it.
Yeah.
Like, if it was just her, like, if God told us outright, like, nope, no one else this year, but, you know, that one woman, like, she really knows Jesus now. And, like, you know, her kids, like, she's raising them in the church, where you just realize, like, oh, I would do all that all over again then, if that was the case. And that's really, I think, the same thing that we always think with, like, Hope Week, where it's like, yeah, if it was, like, one person who actually, like, tried the local church, right, and they found hope here, then it would totally all be worth it. And the crazy part is that we know that the scope of how many people actually are influenced by it or positively affected by it is so much more. And probably way more long run than we even know. That's the other cool part about Hope Week, is definitely, like, 10 years feels surreal in the fact of, like, doing it that many times, but it was always the hope. Like, it was never the idea of doing it once. It was always the idea of doing it consistently, because the goal isn't like, oh man, we painted a playground on Tuesday, someone's going to come to church on Sunday. It's like, that was never the thought process, right? Like, the thought process is, we do this for years and years and years, and people just actually see, like, maybe the local church is actually something that's a good in our community. Yeah. Maybe the local church actually does have hope when people feel, like, hopeless, right? Like, man, they just keep, like we said, they keep showing up. How are you guys still doing this? Everyone else is saying no one wants to serve us. Why is there something different? And we probably won't know what the long run effect of Hope Week is. Who knows? For years and years and years. Yeah.
But I think Saturdays for me always kind of wrap up how it feels in general. Is like you said, you know, Saturday comes around, you've been serving all week, you're tired, you got calloused hands, you know, you're sunburnt maybe, and then those Saturday wrap-up projects come up, and you get people that maybe thought they're knocking off by 11 or noon, and we're out there till 2, 3 o'clock, still finishing up a shelter,
totally.
But they want to see it through. They want it done. They know that we've got a reputation of protecting the community, but also they just want to serve at a level that says we care so much, you know, that they want to see it through. So that's
totally
cool.
True.
All right. So has there ever been, we've been talking about all the great success with project stuff. Has there ever been a project that either due to finances, weather, I know every year we have to cut projects, and that's always the hard part when we get to that part, because we can't do it all. But has there been something that you wanted to finish so badly or do so badly, but just wasn't able to be done because of finances, weather, whatever the reason, you know?
So, like you said with finances, every year there's ones that we pull back on because we're like, we can't, as far as, like, accomplishing those. There have been ones that have gotten rained out, and we've had to, like, pick them back up. But no, actually, I think what is actually kind of astounding is really no. Like, if there's been projects that we couldn't do, now at 10 years in, it doesn't really feel that way, because we just start benching these projects and we're like, we'll come back at them next year. We'll come back at them next year. So I don't really have any heartbreaks, because even ones that were like, man, we'd love to do this, but we didn't have time or we didn't have budget, it's been interesting because we just kind of, like, set those on the roster, and there's been projects that have taken 2 years or 3 years to be able to line up, but then we've still been able to hammer them out because of budget or because of the right, you know, time or tools or whatever. Sure. So actually the weird part is really, it hasn't been the case that there's a lot of them that have really been a disappointment. Whenever there's rain, you're always like, oh goodness, like, is there going to be that case? But the crazy part is God has been so faithful. We've never had, like, a rainy Hope Week. We've never had a week, I mean, like, and there's we get weeks in June that rain like nonstop. And we've never had that. God's always been so faithful to move the weather around where it seems like we can hammer out these projects and we can get something done with them. Or we circle back around to them. So honestly, no, which is kind of surprising.
Cool.
Yeah.
Surprising, but very cool.
I know, yeah.
This one you may have, you may not have. How many hours or dollars would you say have been invested collectively over the 10 years? I know we just did the big numbers from this year.
No, I have
And
the
we compared
totals.
to the first one if you had totals. I think
So,
people would love to know.
just real quick as far as like how we built, okay, going year over year. 2015, 926 hours, $5,000. 2016, 1,413 hours, $8,500. 2017, 1,678 hours, $11,000. 2018, 2,042 hours, $14,000. 19, 2,116 hours, $18,000. 2020, 1,065 hours. That's where we took the dip because we didn't have as much service time. But increased generosity, $33,000 that year. Back to 2021, 2,221 hours, $25,000. 2022, 2,769 hours, $39,000. 2024, 3,325 hours, $31,500. 2025, 4,558, 40,872, the biggest in both those. So total off of those is that we're at 16,629 hours and then $226,000. So just a little short of $250,000 in projects in 10 years.
That's wild.
It really is.
And
yeah.
a part the people who aren't a part of Axe might not realize is that we're still building out our building here.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know? And so when we talk about needs and budgets and stuff and everything, there's definitely things we could do around here if we didn't want to spend that money in Hope Week.
Totally.
But it's such an important thing and part of our culture here that that's not going to happen. But,
Yep.
but yeah.
Literally just 1 year. So that's what's intriguing about the things. I had one person ask me, I think I only had one person notice this. They said 2015, 2025, that's 11 years. And I said, you're right, it is actually 11 years of projects. Because we took off 1 year, which is 2023. And that's an interesting sub note of like, this was Hope Week 10. And the reason why was because, 2023 was the only time that we, literally found out that we had no place to meet that fall. And we canceled everything for the year and just went all in on getting this space ready to be able to move into. In 2023, we did what we called Home Week, where we did a whole week just focused on trying to get these projects done. But that was so cool because that year when we did that, was it right before it? When's the whole TBM Adventures thing in Peru? Is it right before Hope Week usually?
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah. I was out there and Mayor Ken Kolowski came up to me and, this year of not being able to do it, I was like, kind of disappointed. And it was cool because he said, I'm really glad you guys didn't do Hope Week this year with what you were doing. And he said, I'm sure it breaks your heart, but he said, I think you've done so much in this community. He said, this is a great year for you to ask for help. And I said, I appreciate that. And it was a cool moment because it is such a great moment of realizing every single one of us should be humble enough to realize there might be a season in our life that we're not the one giving help. We're the one needing help.
Yeah.
And that's a really great moment to be in too, where you're humble enough to go I need help. Mm-hmm. And you're not too proud to be this is my moment where I'm I don't have anything else to give. I actually need a helping hand. Actually, 2017, I had the same experience personally. So 2017, we do Hope Week. It was amazing, right? All this awesomeness of Hope Week. It was, I believe, it was the week after Hope Week. I think it was the week after. My house was hit by a tornado. Oh. And it shredded everything in my yard, multiple trees down, all this. And I ended up coming outside. I have a pretty big yard, 140 by 140. It's the size of 2 lots because Troy Grove has these big lots where I live at. And my entire yard was just filled with downed trees. And I remember telling Amy, I was like, this is going to take me weeks like to clean up.
Yeah.
Like it's insane. Let alone like I had to call insurance and talk to them because one of the trees smashed into the corner of my house, and I was like, this is all gonna have to be fixed. I remember feeling like so overwhelmed. It was so cool because somebody ended up sharing like Cameron's house got hit by like a tornado and stuff like this, and that day I had multiple people from our church, another church that had some people who were there for like this missions thing showed up, multiple of like our leaders, and then I had like 3 or 4 of my friends from high school all show up with chainsaws, and we cleared that entire yard in one day. By the end of the day, it was completely cleared and it was done. And I remember telling Amy, I was like, this is a really, really good day because I spend the majority of my days being the person who's trying to figure out how to help other people.
Yes.
And it was a really great moment of being humble, of being served. And it's honestly sometimes almost harder, like to be the person who has to like accept the help. But other people saying like, do you need help? And I remember actually being like, I really need help. I have no idea how I'm going to do this. And it was such a cool moment. So 2023 was another neat, humble moment for us as a church where we got to do that. And we got to say like, we actually need help. And we were able to just pour into that. But you're exactly right. Because come 2024, there's still hundreds of thousands of dollars of projects that need to be done in this space. But we immediately were like, we know that we can't lean away from this. Like this is our church's calling. And even though we could try to get more done or we could try to invest more money in this, this is just like critical to us to be able to pour into. Yeah. Other side note, just for reference, when we talk about like that budget, Hope Week costs thousands and thousands more dollars than what the projects cost. This year, our Hope Week t-shirts is $8,000 worth of t-shirts.
Wow.
Yeah, like people don't reference that, but when you have this many volunteers that you give, everyone gets a free shirt, like our leaders' shirts, is $8,000 worth of shirts to be able to purchase, to be able to do that. And like to swallow that bill, but to us, again, we want to be unignorable. It's like that's part of the cost to be able to do that. It's like we want to unify people as a team, not only for our church, but even like we say, when churches participate, like everyone who participates, they get a Hope Week shirt. We're all one big team.
Right.
Like you don't show up with your individual church team shirts. Like
everyone
who comes, like we're all on the same team with this. So the intriguing part is to think, I don't actually even know what that number is. I could probably go back sometime in the future, but we're talking $225,000 worth of projects into the community. Our church has likely spent, oh goodness. Yeah, I don't know. Another $50-some thousand over the course of the years just in regards to what we invest in that. Let alone the fact too, awesome, I know like I'm the lead pastor, but that our church values this so much that myself and other leaders at our church, we commit a huge portion of our May and June to just doing this. When we get to May, a lot of times like that's so much of my focus that I'm putting energy into, and then like even people who are helping on our church leadership team and all that, like that's where they put their energy into. So other things just have to kind of wait for the time being, right, to be able to do that. So much effort put into it. But I feel like the crazy part is we've never had a conversation in the 10 years of should we do Hope Week? That's never come up. Like it's never been like hey, this is getting expensive, or this is getting like should we do this? Our team has always just been like, this is the best week of the year. Like this is like it's so keyed into like who we are as a church that surprisingly, like, because obviously as a church you're always trying to balance budgets or different stuff. That's never been a conversation of like, should we keep doing this? It's like everyone's like, this is everything, right?
Yeah.
Like you got to keep doing this.
That's wild.
Yeah.
All right. What's the possible plans, as they put it, to bring in more of the church, the whole church located in the Illinois Valley as part of Hope Week? I know if people see our signs and stuff, we're very conscious of the fact that we say the church before Acts Church. This is a Christian effort. This is not just an Acts Church effort. Totally. Of course, the majority of the people are from Acts Church. The planning goes on by Acts Church to try to make it easier for others to participate. But is there a way, do we think, that we're maybe going to lean into in the future to try to reach more of the churches to get their participation.
Yeah. And so this is like when you talk about like the challenges of Hope Week, this is definitely one of them. So like as I said, when we actually started Hope Week, the big goal, it came out of an idea of how to specifically unify the church, right? And like to draw people together along this this singular, like what we agree on. There have been multiple challenges over the years, and I'll just be really, really real. One is that in the 10 years that we've done Hope Week, the average church has had 3 different pastors. So in our area, in LaSalle, Peru, in the Illinois Valley, there's been a significant amount of turnover in regards to pastors in our area. So what you find is like when you're trying to do that, of the 10 years, the average church that might have been invited to be part of this, at least 3 or so of those years are brand new. This is my first year. I don't know. I'm just trying to get stuff figured out. So you lose a bunch of that momentum between that.
Sure.
And that's just like kind of a tough situation that is the reality of like perhaps the Illinois Valley and the churches that we have here and just some of the leadership that's gone through it. But that being said, like every single year, we're intentional about those. So this year, we intentionally send out invitations. We make connections. We make invitations with that. One of the hard things that we found is there's a barrier that maybe we as Acts don't like, that we don't struggle with, where we wonder like, why are there so many people from Acts participating? Of course, Acts is a big church in our area, so like just numerically, like that makes sense. But there's a couple of other barriers that we don't deal with as much, where the majority of our church aren't senior citizens. And when I talk to churches, there's a lot of churches that are dominated by senior citizens, and they're like, man, a lot of our people, like, they aren't going to go paint picnic tables in the community in these pieces, right? Like that's not what they can do. So that's one thing where I've gotten kind of responses back of like, oh, we'd love to, like, we'll pray for you guys, but like we just can't really do that part. The other thing that I think is hard is, and why actually Hope Week is really good, it just takes the right vision from the people who are leading in the churches, is there's a lot of churches that their culture isn't wrapped around the idea of serving. Many churches still have a culture of like, you come and you watch, like you just kind of like watch church. Like there are people who do the singing, there are people who do the preaching. Like you come and you just, like your participation is kind of like watching and like going through those things. But the idea of like, you're gonna serve on the teams, like you're gonna show up and this is gonna be your responsibility. I think like that is kind of a unique principle, like we've always embraced at Acts Church, and why I think we have so much greater levels of participation, not just because we're a younger church, but because like I think our church, we're always talking about that. Like we're the hands and feet, like we're gonna go and we're gonna do something. Where I think there's a greater barrier maybe to some other churches in that. When we first started, I spent all my time networking with pastors. So it was pastor to pastor and trying to get their participation in it. After a course of different like pastors switching out and different stuff like that, we actually just started mass marketing it as any Christian can participate, and not specifically trying to go through the churches getting behind it, but just inviting everyone. When we did that, participation didn't go down, it actually went up, which was surprising. Wow. When we just marketed it as grassroots, of like, not that we're trying to get your pastor to promote it to your church, and instead just saying we just love to invite anybody to participate, we actually got greater levels of participation in this, which is not to like pick on anybody, but like it is something that I take into consideration for me, of just like making sure I understand, like sometimes the pastors are actually hindering what people want to do more than encouraging them towards something, because we actually got greater levels of participation. Like, I'd love to be a part of this, which is like where over the years, the conversation that has happened about Hope Week is, should we just make it an Acts Church thing? Like, should we just say, this is Acts Church's thing, we want to bless the community, we want to do this? because the comment has been made in leadership circles of our church where it's like, hey, this is really expensive. This is really a ton of work.
Yeah.
Should it just be about promoting Acts Church? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I get that comment.
Yeah.
But we've still always held on to that hope that in all reality, like this is something that would bless the church so much to participate in, and that we want it to be about affecting people's view of the local church, not just Acts Church, because those people are our brothers and sisters, and we want them to catch that vision with it. So I'd say our prayer is kind of like twofold from here is one, I believe that the Lord will move the right leadership into the churches that are going to be here for the next 10 years or so that we're going to get better and better participation. We've only made it easier and easier to figure out how to participate. And then two, I think that what's probably ahead for us is really strategic partnerships with churches who share our same vision. Because the church is a broad array of people, right? And they have different views on different stuff. But I think us making really strategic partnerships with a handful of churches especially that really have a similar vision that we do of like going and serving and being the hands and feet of Jesus, that to me is probably the best way that we're going to see more of a Church of the Illinois Valley doing that. That maybe it is still majority 3 or 4 main churches that are leading it, but still that my hope would be that it would create that concept of it's the church. It's not still just an Acts Church thing.
Yeah.
And I really do think that that's what's coming in these coming years, as we've kind of built this now where it's not something that's like a sketchy, like, would you want to try this with us? It's kind of been proven that it works. So the nice part is it doesn't feel maybe as risky as when we're in the first few years of doing it. Now it's been such a consistent thing that it's like, I don't know, it almost seems like an offer too good to refuse of like, why would you not want to be part of this thing? That there's so much steam behind it. There's so much evidence of it working in our community to be part of. So that's my prayer.
And it's interesting too, because obviously the trailers have Acts on them. They're our trailers.
Yep.
It's our equipment. It's pretty much our budget. But in our messaging, so obviously with the News Trib, the WLPO, when we get coverage, they're talking Acts Church, they're talking to you, talking to me, Ryan Harris, Ethan, whoever.
Yep.
But our messaging tries to stay consistent in saying that this is the church. Any Christian's welcome to participate, whether that's to donate online, whether that's to come do some hours. So yeah, we're trying to get that message continually out, and we'll just see where it goes.
Yep.
I do think the strategic partnerships with the churches is going to be where it's at. So
I think so too.
So when we're talking about all these different leadership levels, we're talking about all these volunteers. What are some of the challenges you face managing so many numbers, so many people, so many volunteers?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, so budget's one of them. When we started doing Hope Week, I'm pretty sure that a T-shirt cost like $7 or something like that. The 10 years plus COVID in the middle of it really messed up that in regards to the expansiveness of that. I would say the big thing though is like it's always about leadership, right? Like the smaller a project, the less clear it can be. The smaller the project, the less organization and like leadership you need. But the larger these projects grow, the more you need extremely clear leadership, right? Because like when it was me showing up at every project, it's really easy. Like I'm the one who scouted this. I'm the one who figured this out. And like, oh yeah, like that's super easy. When it was one project in the morning, it was one project at night. When it was that size and there was 15 people, 20 people helping with a project, I used to help load the totes myself. It was like me and Jeff. We just load the totes and we put it in the back of my S10. Like I have pictures where we just put it on the back of my S10 and we just take it to a project. Like no problem, right? The part that that really gets complex is when you scale those things for sure, right? Because then, like, solving problems aren't so quick. They're not so easy. When we buy paint, for instance, we can't go and just place our paint order because there's literally not that much paint in the store. Like, they don't have that much. Or when we want to go buy brushes, we have to like start thinking ahead of time because you can literally go take every brush off the shelf of Home Depot and Menards, and that's still not as many brushes as we need, right? So those things just make you start going, wow, we have to be so much more intentional about these pieces because stuff can scale to a place where it's like, oh yeah, the easy solutions aren't even available to us anymore, right? And then the other part with it is definitely like when we talked about leaders, and you've even got to see this since we started, where the scope of the projects got to the place where it isn't just, oh, like it can't just be Cameron showing up at a project. We need a project leader for each of those. To then us going, oh, we don't need a project leader at each of these. We need 6 project leaders at this because the amount of people that you're trying to cover, one person can't walk around and interact with, coach, direct 100 and some people. Like this is not even a possibility. So as we've gone through it over the course of the years and you're talking about the scope of people, it's just, again, the picture of like, you have to continually find people who you can empower and you can release leadership to, right? Now it's gotten to the place where with 19 different cities, multiple different organizations, there's no way one person can make all those phone calls. It would literally take their entire day. So then when you split it up and you have 3 different people like yourself and Ann and Ethan who are making these phone calls and making these contacts and doing this, okay, that might actually work where we can all have enough communication. But then when it comes to like building out what the actual projects are, it's like, right, multiple people doing those and reviewing those. When we get to the place of like sending out our trailers, that someone like Jeff is over top of all of our trailers, and then he now is scheduling a whole support team that's at our hub location, where that never used to be the case. It was the same leaders would come back and pack and repack a trailer. But then like that got to be way too complex where it's like trying to unpack stuff and then switch totes and repack stuff, where now the trailers that are out aren't even counted on for the next trailers that are loaded. And there's a whole support team that builds out the whole next trailers and loads those trailers. And then that's before the old trailers come back in. So those leave and then the old trailers come back in and then get unloaded to be able to do that, to get ready for the next one, right? Or then even down to the fact of now with us having directors where it's not just you guys who are communicating, but we have people where they are overseeing a handful of leaders that are at each of the projects, and they know the details of it to be able to make decisions and solve problems. So the biggest thing throughout all this over the years is it's just every single level you want to get to next is who are the people who we can trust and who are the people that we can put weight on, because Hope we quickly scaled beyond the capabilities of me as a leader. Even though I consider myself like a good leader, like high capacity person, by the time we started getting to year 3, 4, whatever, you're like, wow, this is a lot for one person to be able to handle. I used to do it. There's an old video of me where I'm explaining it to my sister where I was like, you know, like we get there at 6 a.m. and we like start filling coolers with water and ice. And then like we load those trailers, we send them out and they're on site for a 9 a.m. start time. Those projects wrap sometimes at noon, sometimes at 3. If they wrap at 3, they come back. We unload the trailers, we reload the water, we reload those trailers. Those trailers have to be on site at 6 p.m. At 6 p.m., we run through till 9 p.m. They come back here at 10 p.m. We unload those trailers. We start trying to take and get stuff set for the next morning for those projects.
And she's probably looking at you like you're crazy.
Totally, yeah. And I was like literally in all of them, start to finish, right, to make that do. At the time, we weren't doing any of this video stuff or any of that. I was just doing 18-hour days, just the mechanics of it, because that's what it took, right? But then that gets to the place where like, this is way more than what we can do. So then it was like, I think the first people who really started helping was Jeff. Jeff is like, I can really help try to build out these projects. If you can give me a list, I can start packing stuff and getting stuff ready. So it's like, okay, so it can't just be in Cameron's head. It has to be written down on a document. And once it's written down in a document, I can hand it off to you so you can do it. And then it was, we don't have any room for this. So we don't have any room turned into we need to rent locations to be able to run Hope Week out of, which was literally, it was the back of this building when it wasn't our building. And then it was the Kaskaskia garage where we ended up renting a space to be able to run projects out of, because the projects got so big, we don't even have enough room for all of our materials at our location. To then it's 1 trailer, to then it's 2 trailers, it's 3 trailers, it's 4 trailers, to then it's renting equipment to be able to do those pieces. And then I'd say the biggest thing is when we got to 2023, 2023 was the first time where then it got all the way to the place where then that was when I tapped Ethan on the shoulder and I said, I think you should actually be the main leader of this. Which was like scary for me, being 8 years into it, right? Of like what I had built. And you have to decide, like, if you, like, because to one extent, right, it feels like this is like my baby.
Oh, I understand.
Right?
1,000%.
Like, I built this, like, this is like my baby. But when you realize, like, do I want it to be like, my baby, or do I want it to grow up to be an adult, right? And that's the part, like, to use that metaphor, right? Like, that's the part of, like, being a good parent, which is being a good leader. That's like, you actually want what's best for the child, not what's best for like your ego or like filling your thing. Because sure, how many parents, my wife right now, because we don't have another new baby, like she'll say like to my girls, like, I just want you to stay this big forever. Because it's like, it feels, I mean, and totally, oh my goodness, like just right now, like you said about my snuggle buddy, with Willow, like, no, there's literally nothing better than a little like 3-year-old girl wanting to snuggle up with you at night. Like, oh my goodness. Like, it breaks my heart to not think about having that. But that was like even that moment at theirs, like, but what do I want this to grow into? Because do I just want it to be like, it's based on my skill, or is it something that's going to be bigger? And if Ethan is listening to this, like, I knew it was going to have to get worse before it got better. Ethan's a good leader, but there's no way I could expect him to lead at the capacity that I have of being 10 years into lead pastoring a church and then also 8 years of doing this. It's like, that would be a super unfair expectation, right? Like, do this and do it better. It's like, well, there's no way. Like, you have way too much groundwork here. So it was the fact of 2023, and then I canceled 2023 because of Hope Week. He was shattered. He's like, serious, because I built him up to be like, I want you to try this, and then that. But then coming back in 2024, and then this year with 2025, and Ethan growing in that leadership of it, because like, I know if it's going to continue to be able to grow into what it truly needs to be, like, it has to be that he and other people like yourself and Jeff, Ryan, other people who start taking those leadership spots, because it's like, otherwise, like, I would have become the cap to like what Hope Week could actually become. And I want it to be greater than like whatever measure I can give it. I want it to become truly something great. And obviously too, like, dude, I pray that Hope Week would continue on beyond any of us. Like, that's always been my hope for Acts Church. That's been my hope for any of this stuff. I would pray that, if the Lord would call me home, I know I'm not an old man, but no one's promised anything, right? Like, if the Lord would see fit that I only get, a few more years, I wouldn't want everyone to be like, well, that was Cameron's thing. It's sad that he's gone now and this. No, I'd be like, that would break my heart. I want people to be like, no, like, this was given to us. Like, we know the vision. Like, let's keep doing this. Like, we know what to do with this. If Cameron wasn't here, it doesn't matter. Like, he pointed us in the right direction, but we know where to go now. Like, we got the vision of it. And that's definitely like what my hope is for Hope Week going forward, is that we can just find greater and greater people who are willing to step in and say, let me carry this portion. Let me do this part of it, so we can just keep growing it into something that's way bigger than what any one of us could do.
I think one of the things we've talked about a little bit here and there with our director level group and stuff is that when we're talking about project leaders and even people on projects in general, even though everybody's a volunteer, we have to have certain expectations.
Yeah.
We want the projects done with quality. We want the leadership to be prepared and trained and know what they're doing and leading, because they are the ones who make the projects possible. If we don't know what we're doing, if we're a little bit unsure, So we do expect them to make the training meeting. We've tried to really increase our training. We do expect them to go visit the sites and come with questions. Next year, we might be able to take them all out there with the director and stuff and everything. So I always think that's always a fine balance of realizing and acknowledging, hey, they're all volunteers. How much can you expect from them? How much can you, lay groundwork for that stuff? But at the same time, we want everything done well. So I think you've done an excellent job in Tabin leaders. I know that you are also very good at reminding us all that it's not our skill set, our experience necessarily and stuff, that Jesus is never afraid of what we can tackle. So there's times where I know personally, I'll lean more into experience with nonprofits, with leadership, with groups, and I'll forget the prayer side of it, and I've got to be better with that to say, Lord, help me find these right projects. Help me make the right asks of the mayors and the different groups, and then help me have the right communication with my project leaders so that they're prepared and such and everything. But I think when it all comes back to faith and your relationships, again, it does take you down a slightly different path than what I've experienced.
Yeah. No, and Hope Week is such a good. It is so good at that because it's so in practice. It's like running a fast during Hope Week because of like what your focus is. The interesting part about it is, I think Hope Week is so deeply spiritual. Like, sometimes people think about these things like what we do, or like, like this is like a time that's like more introspective to my faith, or these. But man, I just like, you read the stories of Jesus, and so much of his story. I love Jesus is exhausted. He gets on a boat. He tries to go across the lake to find a spot. He gets off, and there's just crowds waiting here for him. He's exhausted. And it says, seeing they had no shepherd, he served them, right? And it was just like where God gives you strength because you're like, I'm so tired. But you're just like, but this is so important. And it's like, then you're just going to have to give me more strength. And I feel like that's like every year during Hope Week. This year, I swear, like the hardest day of Hope Week is like Monday or Tuesday. Like you do Sunday,
Seriously,
and then you get to like Monday, and the reason why is because like Monday, you're like at the end of the day Monday, and you're like, and you're like, it's only Monday.
Yes.
And you have like this crashing feeling of like, how am I going to do this for 5 more days? And then what's so crazy is then you get to like, all of a sudden you're like, man, it's already Friday.
Right.
And that's how it feels like it happens every single year. But that's such a cool picture because I think what happens is like, I'm pretty sure that I run out of what I have to give on about Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah.
Like it's like I hit Sunday, I hit Monday, and then it's usually like Monday or Tuesday. Like I realize like what's actually happening is I'm already out.
Yeah.
Like I'm done. Like if it was just by my strength, I'm already like, dude, I need to go home and take a nap. Like I just want to go cook out and have a have a bratwurst with my family. Like I don't know, I'm out. Mm-hmm. And then what happens then, as I truly do believe, it's like it's the Holy Spirit refilling you with like the strength that you need because like the work is good, right? To quote another Bible verse, I just always think of that time where Jesus, like they basically say like, like this guy wants to talk to you. He's like, you go tell that fox, like I'll work all night tonight and all day tomorrow. And on like the third day, like basically Jesus blows it off because he's just like, I got so much work to do. I don't have time to even deal with that right now. And it's like when you're doing good work, like that's like the Holy Spirit is just filling you with enough strength where I think that is like the next 3 or 4 days. So yeah, probably that's actually kind of a humbling moment to actually think about. I don't know if I've ever actually thought about that till I just said it. I'm probably only really good for about 2 days of a week. That's probably about all that I have. And then it's just like, it's going to have to be the Holy Spirit from here on out.
Yeah. It was Tuesday morning for me because I took the week off this week. So Christy was getting ready for work. I was getting ready to go to the first project, and I looked at her and I'm like, it's seriously only Tuesday morning. And she said, yep.
It's so true. It's so true. Like Tuesday.
Oh, man.
Crashing moment.
So I guess now we're looking vision ahead.
Yeah.
We've talked about some communities we'd like to really try to connect with key churches in and stuff.
Yeah.
And so one of the questions was, the next few years, do you think the Hope Week can spread even further more toward the edges or maybe outside of what we kind of consider the Illinois Valley.
Yeah, and I really do. So if people are watching this and they're also deeply connected to Acts Church, they would know this. But I know we'll have people who participate in Hope Week, but they're not keyed into everything that Acts Church is. I really see the next generations of like where our church is going is specifically trying to figure out how we really saturate this Illinois Valley with God's presence. And what God's really put on my mind to do that was this concept of kind of like overlapping circles. He showed me how we started out of this like LaSalle, Peru, and like I specifically always felt called to like LaSalle, and we even had, when we planted our church, we had people in Princeton, we had people in Mendota be like, oh, we got a building for you, we got a spot for you, we'll give it to you for free. And I was like, no, that's not the right location. I'm like, this is where we're supposed to start. And now looking at it, it really makes sense because I see LaSalle, Peru as the anchor, as the middle of what we're supposed to do next, which is figuring out how we create overlapping circles of Princeton, Mendota, Ottawa, Streator, Henry. All around this, we have these circles of communities. And that's something that I feel like he's calling our church to. But I think that that's something that we can lean into specifically with Hope Week. To me, what I see is I would love to see the opportunity to begin to identify and serve in all 5 of those. And then I would love to see the opportunity to make partnerships with those key churches. When we talked about the idea of like what it could look like as we go forward and strategic partnerships with key churches, that's where I think the value might really be at, is that maybe for LaSalle, Peru, right? Maybe Acts is always going to be a disproportionate amount of the hours that are served in LaSalle, Peru, because we just have a young, big church in LaSalle, Peru, and that's okay. I know the Lord doesn't care about what those numbers are. If there's a church plant in LaSalle, Peru that has 50 people and 5 of them spend a bunch of time serving, I'm sure God's cheering just as loud as hundreds that might be serving from Acts, because it's like it's still the same thing. It's people. It's the amount of people who are going out and saying this is our vision. So maybe that's the case. But then that's my wonder if when we get out, especially to Princeton, Mendota, Ottawa, Streator, and Henry, maybe there are really key churches that are really carrying the missional flag in those areas. And maybe the reality is they're going to be the ones that disproportionately saturate those communities with Hope Week. And I think that would be amazing. I think that would be awesome. If we could take what we learned here, because the amazing part is we have 10 years of knowledge, right? Certainly. If we could take that and then we could create a Hope Week hub in each of those different communities, and we could give all this information, all this wisdom that we've learned with this, all the systems that we've created and all of this, and we could run them maybe in better partnership with other churches there, I think then absolutely. It would be amazing to think about when you go to sign up for Hope Week, you figure out where you're located at, and you're going to kind of work with one of these different hubs specifically for what those projects are. And then the really cool part about that is if we network all those things together, every hub doesn't have to start from scratch and we probably have hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment now that we put time and energy into, where it's like, you don't have to. Like, oh, what do you need? Like, you need 10 wheelbarrows, 20, yeah, we got that. Like, you don't have to go and put that into the budget. We can figure out how we can get all the right tools in the right place. Or then even the idea of like when we come up to those projects too, of even leaders. Like, I think there's such a cool opportunity, and you said it well. Our leaders really get the fact that it's not the Acts Church show, that it really is. It's about the church. And I think it'll be awesome, the fact as we do some of those partnerships, that it might be the fact that it's multiple leaders from multiple different churches. Yeah. And that training that we host for all of our Hope Week leaders, there's no reason that, you were at it. none of it was about being X church.
Right.
All of it was about being the church. There's no reason why that couldn't be 5 or 6 different churches that are coming together, having that same training of here's how we run Hope Week projects, here's how we run these things, and getting everyone on the same page of like, we're all on the same page. Like that when we all show up, we're all wearing the blue shirt or we're all wearing the yellow shirt as leaders, right? Like, doesn't matter what church you come from. So that's what I think is the hope for that part of it is to really expand with that. And the cool part about that is that means that when we get to Hope Week, we could potentially have Hope Week projects that are happening an hour apart, literally an hour away from each other, and simultaneously happening, serving in communities north, south, east, and west, circling that whole area, which to me would just be amazing.
Yeah.
It'd be so good.
And I think we have seen that when we do get further and further away from the hub, it's a little bit harder to get the number of volunteers to drive to make that. So those strategic partnerships, like we talked about, I had a friend reach out about something she would really love for us to be able to do in Bless Her School in Tiscawah.
Yep.
And it's getting further and further. So being able to get those key connections in Princeton, we talked about a couple churches there specifically. That would,
Isn't it
that would
so
really
cool,
open that
though,
up, you know.
to think about what we've built is so potent. The hope is so potent that someone in Tiscawah is like, could you think about coming over here?
Yeah.
Like, it's cool to think about how bright that light has gotten, like, or like what we have done with Hope Week has gotten, that we're talking about people that are half an hour, 45 minutes away who are like, we would love for that to come here. Maybe that's a great avenue towards even just the growth of the church in general in any of those areas. Who knows what could happen in those areas as Hope Week really took off, and what benefit could happen to churches that are already there, or then obviously if the Lord would see fit, my prayer is that over the course of the next however many years that there might even be representations of Acts Church in those communities, and we just get to pour that same energy into it.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly. So the last question.
Okay.
Since we're talking about we're at the 10-year period, what do you think Hope Week looks like 10 years from now? So at the 20-year mark.
Yeah. So I think it is. I think it's 6 hubs of Hope Week that are running. And I think maybe it'll be even more, but I picture the idea that there are 5 evening projects in Mendota, there are 5 evening projects in Ottawa, there are 5 evening projects in Ottawa, Streeter, Henry, where people who are from those communities, there's stuff every night of the week where they can serve right there in the circle that they're in, and there's leaders in each of those different spaces where we're overlapping and we're sharing that information in each of those. In 10 more years, I think that we could be at that space where we have those running in these different hubs, right? I think also when you get that, it's the benefit of the idea of being able to spread out that far is really exciting. But the other really exciting part would be the thought of what would happen when you also then you take all of that and you compress it in together. I would love the opportunity for Hope Week to do things that seem, even to this day, 10 years into it, radically or even like shockingly generous. Like, I would love to see Acts Church and whatever these other community churches just continue to grow in generosity, where the budget grows, where we could literally like build an entirely new like a whole new park. Like, we just want to put in a park in a community, right? Like, what do you mean? Like, literally all of it, start to finish, right? I would absolutely love that in 10 years, that budget is 6 figures, that we're already $100,000 plus is going out into the community in that. That's a radical level of growth from where we're at, even at 40.
Yeah.
But I would love to say that in 10 more years that it would just grow in its generosity, where we'd be able to do projects at that level, right? It would be just crazy to think about what we could do with that. And the big thing is, I've said before, is my real prayer is that there would be something intangibly different. I don't know that we can measure it, but I would swear this area feels more hopeful than it did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It feels more hopeful. And even if people can't put a finger on it, that really is my prayer, that say in another 10 years when we get to year 20, that there's just a different atmosphere about the Illinois Valley. I think the legacy of Hope Week, like what we would really want, is that someday people would comment and just go like, there is a strange atmosphere of hope in the Illinois Valley. And even if they couldn't pinpoint it to us, even if they couldn't give us those kudos, I'm totally fine with that. If the reality is like there's just a different measure of hope in the Illinois Valley, like people would even maybe notice where I don't know what your experience is, but when I think about me and getting to college age and people all wanting to run away from the Illinois Valley and get out of it, right? It'd be intriguing for people to talk about leaving and then going, I don't know, something just makes me want to come back to the Illinois Valley because it's such a hopeful place. Like there's such a different feeling in the Illinois Valley. That's what I want to see happen. Sure. In the legacy of what Hope Week is.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, on behalf of anybody who's going to watch this podcast, personally, for me and my family, I want to thank you for what you've built. It's an amazing legacy to continue on for the next 5, 10, 20, who knows, 30 years.
Yeah.
Hopefully into perpetuity. But
hopefully well beyond our years, right?
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Mine for sure. you're a little younger, so.
No, I love it. And I appreciate you guys so much. You're a really great example, being 5 years into it, of exactly what we need, where we go forward, is people who catch that vision and say, I want to be part of helping carry this banner so that we can just continue to just spread more and more hope into our community. And yeah, that's my prayer. More and more each year. 10 years, it's hard to fathom the fact that it's already been 10 years. But I pray that we're having this conversation at 20 years and going, it's already been 20 years,
right?
You know?
Yeah, I'm hoping I'm still here with you. So.
You'll be here. You'll be here. Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
All right, bud. Thank you.
Man.